How is it that people in first world countries complain about some of the simplest things? And then people in third world countries deal with things that are far worse as we would look at it and seem to be happier. Why are the depression rates and suicide rates higher for more developed countries than they seem to be for less developed countries? Well, it's a matter of perspective, and let's talk about it. I'm Zach. This, once again, is The Average Christian. We are a project about finding what it means to have a real relationship with God and what that looks like and how to live that out in very practical terms by looking at the Bible and seeing what truth is and also dispelling myths about Christianity that even we hold as well. Welcome. If you're listening on podcast, we're asking you to please help us out by subscribing, by rating and reviewing the content as well. And that helps other people find us. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome. If you haven't already, we're asking you to subscribe and hit the notification bell. It keeps you up to date with new releases and material that comes out. Also, to like it if this video helps you, you found it interesting in some way, to leave a comment, leave some feedback on this content, give us ideas for future comment as well, share it with other people if it'll help. Now, back to perspective. When you go to 2 Corinthians chapter 4, you see Paul talking one way, and it looks like he makes an absolute 180-degree turn or shift from the way he was talking at the beginning of that chapter to a little later on, actually the beginning of the letter in chapter 1 and verse 7. But we'll get to that in a minute. I really mean this. And I know there are people who think the exact opposite of what I'm about to say, but I don't know how people who don't have God find their perspective, because all of mine is wrapped up in God, the perspective of meaning and why I'm here and what I'm supposed to be doing and why all this is happening or not happening. It develops all that for me. And I don't know how to operate outside that. Now, another person could wildly disagree and say they don't understand how we need to rely on somebody like that. They have all the meaning and perspective they need. But it seems to show that people who have faith operate differently. We ought to be giving people a reason to ask for the hope that lies within us, as the Bible talks about. But perspective, it's how it's how somebody like my wife can deal with awful pain and still find happiness because she has the perspective to do so, and why somebody else like me would complain about something that just wouldn't bother her at all, or a pain she probably wished she had. Well, besides introducing it now, let's get into the meat of it. In 2 Corinthians chapter 1 in verse 8, he's talking about what all they've gone through, and he had suffered a lot. If you know anything, Paul goes on what we call these missionary journeys, and he has gone through and been left for dead and things that you would normally think of with a missionary. But he says the following in verse 8, "For we do not want you to be unaware, brothers, of the affliction we experienced in Asia, for we were so utterly burdened beyond our strength that we despaired of life itself." I mean, when it questions your motivation to even live and to keep going, and you've seen a variety of examples. You could think of Job or Elijah at a certain point in his life who had some of the same struggles, but that's how he describes what they had gone through. We despaired of life itself. Now, you skip down to chapter 4, and of course, there's a lot in there in between that we're moving over, but he talks about being this vessel for the Lord and for other people. Even in the context of chapter 1, he's talking about why they suffered. It was for other people. It's to share the gospel, to get the word out, to serve other people, and more importantly, serve the Lord. He says in verse 15, "For it is all for your sake, so that as grace extends to more and more people, it may increase in thanksgiving to the glory of God." There's your point. There's the why. So he probably had the same perspective the whole time, but you can at least see this shift in his wording here. Notice verse 16. He says, "So we do not lose heart." That's the goal. It's not that we're going to achieve perfection. The idea is that we keep going, that we don't lose heart. And any Christian who's watching this knows that we've all hit that point of despair, whether it's of life itself. I've never been there, or if it's just so difficult, so much of a burden, so much to endure in whatever way, shape, and form. Sometimes you don't even know if you're going to keep going, if you're going to quit. But he says, we do not lose heart. Why? Though our outer self is wasting away, And they were literally wasting away because they were wearing themselves out in service to God and being hurt and afflicted by other people. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. And that's the part that's going to go on. He goes into chapter 5 to talk about how we actually are groaning to be a soul for eternity and given this new body. But nevertheless, coming back here, verse 17, for this light, watch, you ready? You heard what he said, despaired of life itself. For this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. See the shift? Beforehand, when he mentioned it, it was despairing of life itself. Now it's light momentary affliction. That's like a splinter. It's not that bad. It's only for a moment. And when you're in the middle of it, though, sometimes it seems like forever. Perspective, right? It just depends on your purpose and what it's for and why it's happening. Well, when he gets back to thinking about why he's living the way he is for God, for other people, and he's trying to be just like Jesus, who lived that exact life for God and for other people, he says this light momentary affliction is actually preparing me for the eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. He's the same one in Romans chapter 8 and verse 18 that said, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, that the sufferings of this present world, the sufferings and the things we have to endure now are not worthy to be compared with what's coming next. Meaning none of us are going to look back from heaven and go, wow, that was difficult. I wouldn't want to do that again. I imagine we're going to be looking back and going, that's not a big deal. That was nothing at all. And worth it? That's not even a discussion. So he says it's preparing us for that as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen, which are not your problems, which are not your difficulties and your struggles. Perspective is on the things that are unseen. The things that are seen are transient, meaning they disappear, they go away, they wear out. But the things that are unseen are eternal. And he can go on to make a statement in chapter 5 and verse 7, we walk by faith, not by sight. Perspective. It always gets out of whack. I say always. There are plenty of moments that happen all the time where we get our perspective out of whack and we forget why we're doing what we're doing and we become burdened and we lose heart. And this is the trick, to remember why. Why am I living like this? Why am I, to put it mildly, why am I going to church? Why am I doing these things for the Lord? Why do I keep a prayer life? Why do I study? All of these things have to be kept in perspective in order for us to keep our hearts in check, to keep our minds in check, to keep our motivation. And even Paul here, it's interesting to watch when he thinks correctly. In 1 minute, it's despairing of life itself. In the next phrase, it is light momentary affliction. And that's the key, is to keep practicing on that godly perspective, that godly reason, and remembering that when all this is said and done, I can't even describe how valuable it'll be, but it won't even be worthy to be compared, as he said in Romans 8. So I hope that helps you with your perspective.